Welcome to the Accounting Arc Podcast, where analysis, reaction, and comedy collide to tackle the big topics from the world of accounting and beyond. Join our trio of transformation agents as they discuss the hottest topics in and out of the profession, from breaking down industry trends, to reacting to everyday events, to uncovering the hidden humor in numbers. With wisdom, insight, and a dash of levity, they're proving that accounting isn't just about the numbers. It's about life. Because after all, accounting is in everything. The Accounting Arc Podcast starts now.
Welcome back to another recording of ARC. Today we're taking on a really difficult topic. Unfortunately, in our country, there was recently a political assassination, which is domestic terror. And while we completely denounce that as a thing that has happened, it should never happen in this country in particular. The safety of the people is very important, and the ability to preserve free speech in the way that it was intended by the First Amendment to our Constitution is very important and something we all care deeply about. We've had some interesting conversations around what has happened since that, what the HR implications are, some social media activity, as well as what firms should be thinking about and accountants in general and how we present to our communities.
And as we go into this, we want to ask everyone to give us some grace as we talk through this. We're all three of us are processing through this. The country is processing through this, right? And so what we wanted to do in the spirit of ARC is to just help raise some points for thinking through this, thinking about the implications and how you're going to end up interpreting this, not so much at a personal level, but as you look at the way you support your clients, whether they're internal or external clients. And so that's the spirit that we're coming through this, is just to raise some points for thoughts, and also in the other way that we've approached topics to help try and segregate out some of the different issues, because they're all getting meshed together. And in our pre-discussion on this, we started to try and, what are the key issues that we're looking at here as we go through these? So we thank you for that and hope that you will, I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but at least take to heart some of the conversation that we're going to have today.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be thought-provoking and maybe even challenge maybe some topics that you haven't necessarily worked fully through. I haven't personally worked through them fully. But at the heart of I think a lot of this conversation is this idea of your employment and your personal behaviors in society, particularly social media, and how those things cannot necessarily coexist independent of each other. There are a lot of examples where social media behaviors have had very professional implications for people, and something not even related to politics. I know when my daughters were going through recruiting for college to play college lacrosse, one of the big the advice that all these kids were given was, one, make sure your social media is clean, because the coaches of these universities are going to look at your social media footprint and from that decide if this is the type of human they want on their team. And two, lock down also those social media channels to keep them private within your community so that things can't be, shown to the general public. And, I think that type of advice really is really good advice for those kids, but also extends into, us as professionals, because when we are employed by a firm or an organization, like it or not, we are representing that organization when we walk out on the sidewalk or when we post on Facebook or Twitter or whatever those organizations are, which is a challenge for a lot of people.
In the context of our profession, I think that also gets a second level of elevation because as accountants, we are the objective, at least objective, if not independent. We are the viewed as the objective ones, and we are need to be viewed as the bringer of trusted information. And so, with that additional layer of we need to be seen as unbiased, it doesn't mean that we can't have these, but in the way that at least publicly we're presenting things, we need to have that layer of unbiased, adds an additional layer, I think, beyond what the general public or the general person would have.
Well, and I think being cognizant of that from both an individual perspective and a firm perspective is really important. And understanding that, like, you do have freedom of speech as protected by the First Amendment. And I think clarifying what that is really important. Freedom of religion. Like, there shouldn't be any laws restricting what religious party you can be in or laws based on religious ideology. There shouldn't be any restriction on your ability to peacefully meet with others in this country and have conversations that, are whatever you want them to be. Really, the only limitation of freedom of speech is a limitation to incite violence. And I think that it's important to differentiate there because if you are intending harm on somebody or believe that somebody deserves harm or violence, that is not free speech anymore. That is still restricted in this country because it is not okay to get people riled up and wanting to promote any kind of violence on any other humans, right? And so when you take that to the firm level, if people are posting on social media that, like, murdering other people is okay because you disagree with their political viewpoints or you disagree with their ideologies, like, that is not freedom of speech, and that is also not okay. And it is okay for firms to take action if people are doing that. There are certain restrictions in certain states. Like, some states have very heavy protections for political speech, meaning that if you are a member of a political party, that it doesn't align with the ownership of a private company, you cannot be fired for that, right? And then other states have more restrictions, like you can go to whatever events you want. You can be on the front page of the New York Times protesting, and you're protected in certain states. In other states, there are zero protections for political affiliations and actions. And those states are allowed to terminate you for your viewpoints and for participating in things outside of the belief or the culture of the firm. And I bring that up to say, like, you should really understand the laws of your state, the implications of where you're going to work, right? Like, if you are very politically left-leaning and you go to work for an extremely conservative firm, that might not be the best culture fit, right? Like, that might lead to some days where you cannot express yourself freely and fairly in the office without retaliation of some sort. And in some states, that would be illegal retaliation. In other states, it would not be. And so understanding where and when freedom of speech applies and freedom of political affiliations and organization applies is very important foundationally. And it's also important to know that, like, political speech is not necessarily protected from an employment perspective.
Yeah, all good points. In fact, I just made a note to check with ChatGPT as to what the Maryland laws are with respect to these implications. But I think there's also you touched on it, Liz, like culture fit as well. If you're in an organization where the culture, whether it be political or sports or religious or any of those things, and it is contrary to your beliefs and your values, there's also a question as to whether or not, like, you should maybe start exploring better places where you don't have to feel that tension every day when you walk into the office and worry about saying the wrong thing because everybody else in the room just doesn't believe what you believe.
Totally agree with you, Byron. That's in the research that the center has done around DEI, one of the big things we looked at there was diversity and inclusion. And there seemed to be this interpretation that inclusion meant that anybody that wanted to work at any place has the right to work there and to feel included. And that was an interesting one to look at because I agree with Liz. When I was doing some of the research, I came up with some great examples of firms that one that leaned way right, and when I kind of looked at their overall culture, performance, everything, there was nothing wrong to me. They had a different viewpoint. Their staff aligned with that. Someone that was way left would not want to be appropriate working there. You probably not. You would not be comfortable. But that means you just simply choose not to work there. Uh, we evolved that discussion some more, and which is why in the end our recommendation was really to focus on belonging. Do you feel like you belong in this firm, or are you creating an environment that attracts the right people, and the right people being those that have a shared sense of values, the way that you work, and that are not disrupting? That's why in my firm, we have a value of individuality rather than inclusion. We believe that everyone should be able to be themselves, bring their whole selves to work, as long as it's not disrupting the harmony of the team. And so if you have these viewpoints, keep them in private. Don't bring it out and start to do things that are going to upset other team members, which I know starts to sound like, well, now we're going to separate that public and private life, like Byron was saying, these need to be able to coexist. I agree with that. But it's really a judgment around, what really is going to let us work together effectively as a team is the bottom line for us.
This is the thing I work with my child on, who is extremely ADHD and impulsive and talkative and likes to say everything that's in his mind. And so, one of the things that we work on is he has questions to ask himself before he does things, right? And one of them is this the appropriate time for this? Right? Like, if I am driving and actively trying to figure out where we're going, should he be asking me about the details of like dark matter in astrophysics and like the mathematical equations to calculate like how and when we will find it? No, the answer is no. That's not the appropriate time for that conversation, right? So like do the same thing and ask yourself, is this the appropriate time for this conversation? Is a team meeting the appropriate time to say, I disagreed with this person's viewpoints. Let me tell you why, and get into a debate about it, right? And I bring that example up to say, like, it is totally foundationally acceptable to disagree with somebody's viewpoints, and to have different ideologies and different desires and wants for this country. That is totally normal, whether it be your team member, whether it be a political person, whether it be somebody that was just assassinated. What is not okay is to take that to justify violence and to do that in a way to incite people with viewpoints that may be aligned with that person, and dig into this debate of justification of political views. I know that is happening across the country right now. And I know that there is this conflation of, well, you can't disagree with somebody and also not promote violence against them. Like those things, like that doesn't work, right? Like that's absolute horseshit, in my opinion, right? Like right. You can 1000% disagree with somebody's ideology and viewpoints and still think that them being executed is a horrific and heinous and depressingly terrifying act. And I think that needs to be spoken about more, and that you can't jump to conclusions on what somebody else is feeling about this act just because of their political ideologies.
And something that you sparked for me there, Liz, is I think one of the major challenges we have in society as a whole is we have lost the ability to have open and constructive discourse when it comes to topics that we disagree on, because it seems like we have dropped to the lowest common denominator of attacking the person and the individual, as opposed to having the conversation about the specific topic without saying, well, you are stupid and you are dumb and you're just an idiot for believing those things. It's been lost. And we could pontificate that it's social media, and it's probably true, and a lot of other factors. But, I think there is opportunity for you to have these discussions in this discourse, maybe not in the conference room, but in a separate office, in a constructive manner where people can have intelligent conversations that don't just lead to, hating the individual for having a different viewpoint.
Completely agree with you. I'm so glad to hear you use the word discourse rather than discussion. So for the listeners out there, if you haven't seen a couple of our other bonus episodes, we have actually three episodes, two bonus episodes and one other episode where we've tackled this whole, how do you have these types of conversations around politics? How do you respectfully disagree with people and have discourse rather than discussions? And if you go listen to the podcast, you understand why we differentiate between those words. So go check out some of our history there. If this discussion, I almost did it, if this discourse around what we're doing, what this conversation that we're having is resonating with you.
In today's world, cyber threats don't just target big businesses. They target you. Your small office or home office is at risk.
There are a lot of solutions out there. Not all of them have the same level of security. The Soho Protection Package is designed to provide proactive cybersecurity solutions.
If your firm is looking for assistance in developing your personalized IT policy, connect with an advisor today at link.improvetheworld.net/Soho Cyber. Gain peace of mind that you have the right technology in place to stay protected.
So I grew up in a very Jewish family. Both of my parents are Ashkenazi Jew, which means like my entire lineage is. We had family members come over right before World War II to avoid genocide. And one of the things that my grandparents always taught me was, in order to have your freedom, everybody has to have freedom. And I think that has resonated with me for my entire life, in that if I think the world should be a certain way, that's one thing. If you think the world should be a different way, that's also a thing, right? And we have a political system that is supposed to be designed to allow for, good elections where we have the majority of our people and voices being heard. Now, I can pick apart how all of that works in the electoral college and process, and why it's outdated, but that's a whole other conversation. The point is, we have to live in the system that is created, and this country protects freedoms on both sides, and it should. And we should have a ability as a culture to have these conversations with the underlying assumption that your opinion is as valid as mine.
Yep. Yeah. There was I want to say it was Adam Grant podcasts. I think it was Adam Grant, where he spoke with, the world debate champion, like multi-years running, to discuss like the strategies behind it. And one of the biggest takeaways that I had from it was, as you approach conversations where you disagree, is find agreement first, right? So in the example that we're all talking about, we can both agree, no matter our perspective on this, that murder is bad. Assassinations are bad. Domestic terrorism is bad. Like, these are common things that we should be able to agree on. And once you begin to find the places where you have agreement, it becomes easier to take on the other aspects of the conversation, because you know that there is a connection there with agreement. I thought it was such a great conversation, because I think it's something that a lot of people need to really work on, figuring out how to have these conversations discourse in a constructive way where like we can both walk away feeling like maybe we've learned something and maybe we've gotten perspective that's different than ours that I think is also something that people have miss I think lost just the ability to have perspective of through any other person's life experiences.
And in the end, agree to disagree, and that's okay.
Without a doubt, no doubt.
It is okay. And I think that, like, as we think about the implications of these discussions and others, and as things develop in real time, I do believe humans need an outlet to discuss it and to process it. And many of us, myself included, are external processors where I like to talk about things to understand how I feel about it. I might not be able to internally just be like, oh, this is my opinion about the whole thing until I'm talking it through and saying, like, well, I believe this because of this. And this experience in my life shaped my belief system around this. And so being able to externally process in private, in safe, in good environments is very important. And I think that the thing that has happened mostly since COVID of let's troll people online and just like hammer at their core being and question them as a human instead of like addressing facts and belief systems and underlying assumptions is a huge problem. And I do think that many people are unfortunately having to deal with, pushback in their employment because of it. Because again, political belief systems aren't always a protected class. And then, when you look at the place to do that, like, is it LinkedIn? Is LinkedIn the place to post your like scathing political manifesto? Probably not. That is the one social media platform that is 100% connected to your employer. Like, that is not necessarily the best place to have these conversations, right? Thinking about how do you do it in a more private setting or a safer environment that doesn't have the same kind of backlash, and maybe not publicly posting on social media inflammatory things just because you think that that's what is needed today.
Yeah, all really good points, and it's another theme that we've talked about many times in many different episodes around this idea of discretion and really thinking about the environment that you are in and the position that you are putting yourself in. And I trust me, I understand at my core, like I feel like I have some very bold beliefs that I believe in very wholeheartedly. And, there have been plenty of moments where I've wanted to, plant my flag in the ground and let everybody know that I have the answer. But you can do yourself a lot of favors by picking and choosing your moments and where and when to have those conversations. And also, like, one of the things I do frequently is, I try to evaluate how much impact this conversation is going to have. If this is somebody who has made it clear that their position is not going to move, then that's a place where I don't want to invest my time, because my time and my mental health is way more important than somebody who just isn't going to move. If it's somebody who, maybe is close to you or maybe is open to having really constructive discourse, then that's an opportunity to invest some time. Maybe you can learn something too. So discretion, rather than just screaming at everyone everywhere, can go a long way and maybe even have greater impact in the long run.
I like the way that you describe that. I know we often hear this, like, pick your battles, and the implication is usually pick a battle you can win, but it's really pick a battle that is going to be productive, whether it's creating understanding, even if it's you just understanding their point of view rather than winning them over. So I really like the way you said that, Byron. I think tying this back to the profession again, too, I think there's that additional layer of we do have to help pull out all of these different perspectives and information so that as we're facilitating decision making on whatever the topic might be, and the topic might be, what are we going to do about this person that's posted this stuff? We need to make sure that we're taking that step back and look from an objective perspective, including all of these different perspectives in a conversation or in the analysis of a situation, and helping the business owner, the client, whoever it is, make what is going to be the right as well as legal decision in a situation like this.
Absolutely. And I do think it is important for people to understand, and I'll circle back to the laws and rights that you have. Look up your state, understand what it is, and then make intelligent decisions. Like if you are extremely politically active and that is something that's very important to you, like great. I don't care what side of the spectrum you're on. It doesn't matter to me. I love passion, right? What I do want is for people that are that passionate and that excited to be publicly protesting and doing these things to understand, am I in a state where that's protected, or do I need to be really cognizant when I pick my employer?
Absolutely. And you know what? If you have these concerns, if you were worried that you were going to step over the line, have a conversation with somebody that you work with your boss, with your manager, to figure out where that line is and what that boundary is. I mean, I think, there's a lot of, people taking the I'll ask for forgiveness type of approach to this. But, in a situation where it is very explosive, there are a lot of emotions and there are a lot of feelings at hand. Sometimes forgiveness is not going to be enough if it puts your family's income or your well-being at risk. So, if you have concerns about these things, it's okay to ask, what is that line? Where is the boundary?
Yeah. And consider your clients as well. I mean, if you are
That's right.
in public accounting and publicly active, understand the implications that could have for your clients too. And just be cognizant of it and understand it, I think is the biggest picture of it. And then, coming back to what has been happening in our country, I think our online and disconnectedness and lack of strong community has led to very interesting discourse and very unproductive ways of discussing things, and logical fallacies in every direction, lack of real facts, and lack of true understanding of situations, because our media has very much become an opinion in many directions and in all sides. I say that from every side of the political spectrum. And so I think, media literacy becomes more and more important, but it's also important to be open to understanding belief systems and ideologies that don't align with your own. So one of the things I do purposefully on my social media is I follow news outlets that are known to be left and right leaning. And I don't block people that differ from opinions for me. And you will never find me posting something like, if you said X, then just delete me as a friend. Because, I am going to come to the underlying assumption that if you are a person that I care about, and that cares about me, like I believe your heart is in the right place as my generous initial assumption. And why you believe something that could be so hurtful to me is something that I want to discuss with you in private and understand where you're coming from and what that actually means, right? And I hope that more people can learn how to do that in this digital environment that we have, and more people can understand the implications of having those conversations publicly, and know your rights, know your protections, know if you don't have any, and don't be an asshole.
Sage advice. And I will echo your, we need to hear and learn all. Just like you, I subscribe or follow some things that people, institutions that don't necessarily align with what I believe, because I want to understand what the other side is really looking, what are some of the foundational things that they're saying, how are they approaching it? Because as Byron said, what we need to do is first find that common ground. What do we agree on? And that was where in a discussion with everything that was going on, in a discussion with someone that is far right in MAGA, that was our first thing was we agreed that killing and violence is not justifiable and is not appropriate in any of these situations. And that finding that first ground laid that foundation for us to then have additional discourse around this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just to kind of wrap it up for me, Liz, I'm with you. In fact, I mean, I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter anymore. And one of the reasons was I saw a lot of people in my circle like celebrating being blocked, right? Like they were celebrating this, like, or celebrating blocking other people. And it was just like, this like just terrible behavior in my opinion, because the only times I have ever blocked any individual is because they were an asshole, because I couldn't have a good conversation with them, or they said things that were just not constructive and rude and made it clear that they weren't open to having a conversation. And I just had to protect my eyeballs from the cortisol that was going to spit through my veins by seeing them in my thread. So, I think I may change my tagline in Twitter for anybody who's still looking at my account that says, just don't be an asshole.
Yeah, I think you should. Also,
I think I will.
yeah, the culture of Twitter is a little not my culture. Same with Nextdoor.
Swamp.
Like that app is all people just complaining about stuff and like complaining about their neighbors. And I'm like, what? I don't need this. So I do think picking social media platforms to engage on that align more with your culture, at least like the people you're around in that, is really important. And it is okay to like just sign off and be like, I don't care. This is whatever. Move on.
Yep.
I don't actually block people in general, like even people that have been like personally attacked me, unless I feel like there is a chance they will physically attack me or like come to my home at some point. Or show up somewhere that I am publicly and cause harm to me personally. It doesn't faze me.
That's
like
reasonable.
You say whatever you want. I'm like, okay, that's a dumb opinion, but it's your opinion. So
You got thicker skin than me. I just don't need to see it.
I don't know. It doesn't affect me. Like unless it is direct, like unless it's my boss or it's somebody that works on my team or it's somebody that I feel like could potentially physically harm me. Their like ideologies, their belief systems, what they want to debate about, like it doesn't really affect me, in that capacity, like in an emotional capacity. Academically, like, yeah, I can engage all day and have academic debates about whatever. But I was also grew up in a house where I had an extremely liberal, like mother and an extremely conservative father. And we would sit down at the dinner table and have political debates all the time and like discuss the implications of all of these things in like a very loving and supportive and academic way, where it didn't lead to violence or anger or, situations that were uncomfortable. It led to like balance and understanding and support. And, like there were many times that they were on complete opposite ends of the political spectrum in their belief systems and ended those academic debates on complete opposite ends of the political spectrum in their belief systems. But at least they had insight into why the other one believed something different and supported something different. And that is what I base my interactions with people on. Like if I'm academically engaging with anyone, it is for the pursuit of knowledge. Like maybe I don't have all the facts or I don't have all the information to make a good decision. And if I respect you, I will listen to your interpretation and your beliefs. Or I want to understand you better so that I can be a better friend.
It's awesome.
That's a great wrap. I think, and advice on how to approach this. So again, for all of you listening, I hope you've got some nuggets that you can take away from this. And I thank you for accommodating us as we kind of process through a lot of this and really think about how do we approach these types of situations. So see you on another episode. Thanks, everyone.
Be good.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.